Spring is over and it's time to evaluate this team holistically. Does this group have the ability to win the Big 12? And where are there still question marks? Ian Boyd, X's and O's guru at Inside Texas, is here to break down the Longhorns personnel and how that relates to our future success. Inside Texas is the place for insightful analysis on your favorite team day in and day out. Subscribe to InsideTexas.com today. Link in the description. We have a couple months of new data to help us project the Longhorns' true capabilities going into year 3. Let's take inventory and see what we're working with. Without further ado, let's get into it. Thanks for coming on, Ian. I know you're in the middle of watching your son. I appreciate that. But first, I wanted to see what you made of the quarterback room between the practices and the spring game. As far as observing Quinn, is he demonstrating more command, making the right reads, and doing the little things correctly? And then how did you feel about Malik's performance? Did that provide some much-needed reassurance at the number 2 spot? And then finally, what did you see from Arch with the deck kind of stacked against him, not playing with the top talent?
Ewers definitely had a pretty strong spring showing. Kind of heard all the right things about him coming into the spring, that he was rededicated, learning a little bit more about how to put in a more professional level of work. He's still in an intermediate phase between like a professional caliber passing prospect and the guy that couldn't prevent TCU from putting 9 in the box. But he's got to, those are steps that he has to take to get to the level that Texas fans want to see him at. I think his trajectory is pretty solid. He made a few pretty good reads, a few pretty good throws. He had a couple moments where you're like, you still see the lazy footwork or the I can get away with this kind of holding the ball low, trying to throw off the back foot, what have you. But he's on a good track. And I think that another element to his game that we'll see more of in the season that we saw a little of in the bowl game, he's actually pretty good in the spread when things break down. And his ability to throw off platform from different arm angles becomes something that could be a weapon, where it's not when it's just hit number 1 or hit number 2 or it's a spring game. We're not having you dance around out there. Malik Murphy, excellent showing. You had to get a little bit nervous when he missed the first week of spring. The foot again. Why is this keep being a problem? Is this going to be a problem for a long time with this guy, with how big he is? Is he going to be able to get the reps he needs to progress, because he was so raw coming out of high school? But he was great. He showed a lot of comfort going through reads. He knew how to place the ball in the deep throws. In some ways, he's honestly appears a little more natural in the Mac Jones style Sark offense than Quinn Ewers himself is. You have to be pumped as a Texas fan that this guy looks like he could be a very viable backup at the very least. And maybe if Ewers stumbles or if he just gets hurt, you might have a guy that could push him, replace him, and without having to substantially move the goalposts on what's expected this season. That's a really big deal. Arch Manning, you don't want him to have to be that. Whether he could be a similar stopgap is a little unclear. Like you noted, he had to play against some really good corners. He was the one that had to face the Anthony Hill blitz package. Malik Murphy did not get that as much. He didn't have, the top receivers working against. He was thrown to like walk-on receivers. My colleague at Inside Texas, Jerry Hamilton, noted that Sark probably needed Arch to have a quiet game to keep the national hype around him and him versus Quinn Ewers from reaching a fever pitch. So it's possible that Sark stacked the deck against Arch to forestall narratives developing, and you have to keep that in mind. I know that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but if you don't think that there's a little bit of conspiracies going on in how coaches stack these spring games, then you just need to pay a little bit more attention, because they are there. The upshot is that we can't see that much of where Arch is right now. To me, he looked about what we expected out of high school. He's got some poise. He knows what he's doing. Things are going a little bit fast, though, and he's going to need a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's a stacked quarterback room. And how do you suss out this complicated running back group? Brooks and Keelan out, the aggressive running style of Red with some wide receiver traits, the wow factor of Blue's playmaking. And then you've got Baxter, who looks more like a wide receiver right now due to a lack of muscle, but he's got huge potential. It's interesting because this guy gives you a little bit of that, and this guy gives you a little bit of this. So if you're Sark, how do you parse between all these backs trying to find your Bijan replacement?
It's going to be difficult. It's going to be interesting to see how Sark manages it, because we know he would rather have a feature back that is going to get carry the load and be a reliable guy who knows how to get the tough yards inside and consistently pressure, the A and B gaps for the offense. I think you have to lean towards Jonathan Brooks owning that role right now. We didn't get to see him have a little coming out party in the bowl game because of hernia, presumably, and maybe the desire to keep Keelan Robinson engaged. And then we didn't get to see it that much in the spring either, for the same reason of the injury. I'm with you in that Baxter still looks like Paul Waddlington's favorite metaphor, the Great Dane puppy that hasn't really grown into his body yet. He doesn't really understand that he's a Great Dane and that he can just be mauling every other dog on the block. He's still kind of figuring it out. I have no idea what his timeline will be like, if he'll, flip a switch in the fall and look like a world beater, or if he's going to need just a little bit of time, if it's going to happen during the season. The other guy, Savion Red, looks like he's all about it in terms of the traditional running back between the tackles stuff. But his pass protection, we've already seen, looks like you would expect to look for a quarterback receiver turned into a running back. He's kind of a fish out of water there. That's a really big deal if he's going to be an every down back. But he has time. He has time to get there, but he's just not there yet. Obviously, Keelan Robinson and Jaden Blue are not complete feature backs. They're smaller, almost like receivers at times. So I think Jonathan Brooks is your runaway favorite. And then if he cannot do it, then you hope that probably one of Red or Baxter makes a leap between now and week 1 or week 2.
And last year, some of the best runs we saw from Bijan and Roschon were 0-yard gains, avoiding getting tackled 3 yards in the backfield. So they did a ton to make the offensive line look better than they were in the run. And we feel comfortable with Christian Jones and Kelvin Banks at the edge, but what did you see from the interior offensive line? We don't have those experienced running backs anymore, so what do we need to see from the interior to make sure things are going to run smoothly?
I think interior offensive line is probably the most important question for the offense, because if they're more of a spread passing team, then you got to make sure that you're not giving up quick pressure inside. And that's an interior thing. Like, your tackles can be great and you can still give up quick pressure. Without, as you noted, without a Bijan Robinson or a Rashawn Johnson, the run game is a little more incumbent on the interior line to road grade. So that it is really a big question this season. It's hard to gauge where we're at there, because we didn't see Cole Hudson in the spring game. He was a freshman last year. That guy could be in line for a leap. He could be like an all Big 12 player. Maybe not, but maybe. We don't know. Hayden Connor didn't play with the ones. He was playing like center. He's only a junior. Is he making leaps? It's hard to tell. DJ Campbell was kind of the guy that they expected to be the guy to really push for a starting job. He gets injured. We don't see him. Neto Umeozulu and Cam Williams, kind of swing guys, could play tackle or guard. They played guard in the spring game. Neither of them looked ready yet, but they're also two of the better athletes that they've recruited, or really in years, at that position. So you don't really want to draw too hard a ceiling for them for the fall either. So it's a big question mark, and I honestly, I don't know. I think that they have a lot of reasons to be optimistic and to think that they can figure it out in the fall, but I don't think it's figured out right now.
Yeah, I agree. And a room that has more of a clear outlook is the wide receiver room. And it's hard not to feel really excited about this group with both the frontline guys and the skilled depth. Where are you at confidence level wise with this fun mix of receivers?
I think wide receiver for Texas is kind of a no-brainer, massive strength. We know that Xavier Worthy is a really dangerous weapon. I think that he could be more of one in year 3, and perhaps with more of a tailored role where he's not kind of the end-all be-all of the outside passing game. I think Jordan Whittington is quietly a really nasty weapon in the slot. We've only been seeing glimpses of it for the last 2 years because the spread has not been the mainstay formation of the offense, and we haven't been able to see him major in it. There's just have so many options outside. Like, Casey Kane could be a reliable chain-moving outside receiver, and he probably won't be because they have A.D. Mitchell and Isaiah Neyor coming back in the fall, who could probably be that, maybe downfield weapons. They just have a lot of known commodities, a lot of remaining upside, and then they have, one of the best receiving tight ends in the country, JT Sanders, to create just one more weapon for the defense to worry about, and one more reason why some of these guys are going to get a lot of opportunities to get favorable matchups in space.
I was just thinking about that the other day, that even our second string wide receivers can consistently win one-on-ones. And then flipping to the other side of the ball, we had a stout interior defensive line last year, but we lost Ojimo and Coburn to the draft. And I think this year's interior will also be really good, but what did you see out of that group throughout camp?
I think it was very promising that Byron Murphy stepped up and was pretty dominant in the spring game at times. That's a big win. Not really unexpected because he's been good, and so you figure with the opportunity he was just going to tear it up. But still good to see. Devondre Sweat in the spring game honestly wasn't really as good as expected, but I don't know. It was like the first hot day in Texas, I think, that they were practicing in. He's like a sixth-year guy. He's kind of already proven it, and the reports of him throughout spring have been good. Not super worried about that yet. Alfred Collins is looking like you would hope. He's bigger, he's stronger, exclusively inside. He looks good as a pass rusher. He looks improved as a run defender. That's already three guys. I mean, most of the league would be envious of this position. They still have, Trill Carter coming in. He's a known commodity. He's going to be a solid player coming from the Big Ten. They have a lot of depth. They have some guys that look like playmakers. It's an obvious team strength. I don't think there's too much to say other than that it's probably somewhere where they can differentiate themselves next year in the league.
Do you think the edge is at a competitive level, both starter and depth-wise, even though we seem to be lacking that clear number one pass rusher?
I think that they can get there by committee right now. It would be really nice if they could just go into the portal and get an all Big 12 caliber pass rusher on the weak side. Those guys don't get into the portal very often because the schools where they're at will play them and keep them. So they can play, the Ethan Burke and Barron Sorrell combination looks solid. I don't know where Burke will be by the fall. So far, he's on a pretty quick development track. He was able to gain weight very easily and effectively, once he gave up lacrosse, all that running around. Sorrell is a known. He's going to be a good player. They could play big and play like Jere Bledsoe and put Sorrell on the weak side, and that's a pretty good lineup. If Bledsoe continues to come along like we've seen, they could play smaller with like a linebacker opposite Sorrell. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute when we get to the linebackers. So I think they have options to arrive at lineups that will be good from week to week. But I don't know if they have like dominant feature pieces. Maybe that's a good thing, honestly. Maybe it's better this year to be able to get into dime, to be able to mix and match. And just kind of lean on the interior guys. But that's also the kind of thing you say when you don't have a dominant guy. So,
yep, that's the intellectual workaround when we don't have that clear-cut edge rusher. And then how about linebacker? We have an NFL guy in Ford, but what do you think of Will? And do we see more of that unique Anthony Hill package and that kind of heat seeker get to the quarterback usage we saw in the spring game?
I think the linebacker room is in really good shape. Jalen Ford is a really, really good player, so that's great. They're set there. I will say I think the only other linebacker on the roster who diagnoses and plays downhill the same way that Ford does is probably Jet Bush. Mo Blackwell and David Benda look really comfortable out there. Benda is really pretty good in coverage. He moves well. He knows where to look. But both of those guys are kind of like wait and see in the run game. They like to hang back a little bit, keep their noses clean, and then use their speed to get to the ball once they know where it's going to go, which is fine. That can work, but it'd be better to have another guy that knows how to read and like fight through the wash and make tackles at the line of scrimmage. I don't know if they have that guy, unless they were to play Ford and Bush together. I don't think they'll do that, but maybe they would. Anthony Hill could become a really good off-ball inside linebacker with time. I think that his future is a little bit murky there because he actually kind of plays like Blackwell or Benda. He likes to kind of hang back and see and then close. A difference between him and those guys is that when he closes, he can blast his way through blocks, whereas those guys kind of evade. He's more of like just a wrecking ball, but he's a really good pass rusher. And they've been using him that way, obviously. They used him that way extensively in the spring. So you kind of wonder if he's just a weak side pass rusher. I think he will be that at times this year, maybe on third downs, maybe for particular games. But you also wonder if that's just kind of his future, is just to spin down and play on the edge. Just why turn that guy into an inside linebacker if you know he could be a dominant edge, So we'll see. We'll see long term what he is.
It'll be fun to watch Hill's evolution, and finally, experienced secondaries are a huge factor in defensive success, and we've got dudes throughout. Do you feel this is going to be a high-level secondary?
To my eyes, this looks like one of the better Texas secondaries since probably 2017. They have some NFL caliber corners. They have so many good corners, I don't even know who's going to start. They brought in Gavin Holmes to start, I think. That guy's a really good corner, very athletic. But then Terrence Brooks doesn't really want to give up the job that he was starting to win at the end of last season. And Terrence Brooks he might be awesome as well. Ryan Watts maybe less upside than those two guys, but then was arguably like one of the anchors of the team last year. They have a lot of guys there. They have a lot of options. Safety with Jaron Thompson, you have kind of a solid, really solid floor. I think Michael Taft helps to set a really nice floor. Jalen Catalon could be a really big upside guy if he stays healthy. Keaton Crawford is coming along. Brian Allen, BJ Allen was coming along as well. I don't think he's there yet, but he's lost a little bit of weight. He was getting kind of big and heavy, and he's moving very fast. They're adding more guys in the fall so that long term the depth is going to be very strong. They have experienced guys. They have guys that are veterans of Big 12 play. They have elite athletes. They have elite cover guys. They have depth. It's going to be remarkable if they fail to put together a really top-notch secondary. Should be the best in the Big 12.
Well, I like hearing that. And I always appreciate the insight, Ian. Please let the fans know where to track you down to read your latest analysis on both the Longhorns and the wider sport of college football.
Got to be a subscriber. Got to check me out at Inside Texas. We've got so much content there these days, so many good writers, so much to talk about. Texas on the upswing, big recruiting off season ahead. And then check out my thoughts on football strategy and national coverage at my Substack at americaswargame.substack.com.
And that's a wrap on Ian Boyd. Head over to Inside Texas and sign up today. Thanks for hanging out. Watch some more of my videos here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want to support quality Texas content. As always, hook on.